Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. I've set myself a big task. I'm trying to use up all of this upholstery fabric that I've got in abundance. Let me tell you what I've done so far. Some of you might remember my soft boxy bags that I've done recently, and they were a really big hit. I found some other fabric that was nice and soft as well, not quite as soft, but really nice nonetheless. And I've decided that I want to use it all up, and I've got narrow pieces like this, but they're quite long as well. They're about that length and the widths vary. The other thing I've got in the same fabric are big offcuts, about this size. Now, of the narrow ones and the wider ones, there are, I think, about 16 pieces of each. And what I've done so far is fused some fusible fleece to the back of every single piece, just to give it a little bit of stability. I want whatever bags I make to be able to sit up but not be too rigid. This fleece will give me a really nice balance for whatever I might be working on. I don't know yet. So I've spent the past hour and a half using my heat press to fuse the fusible fleece to the back of all of these pieces of fabric. So far I've used 6.5 meters of Parlan. That's the product that I'm using, and I've spent 1.5 hours doing that. Thankfully I've got a heat press and it saved a heap of time. I'd probably still be doing this 3 hours later if I didn't have that. So what I've done, fused all my fabric. It's all ready now for me to cut up and sew up. I just have to decide what projects I'm going to do. My plan is to make lots and lots of different bags and pouches, using up every single skerrick of this fabric and only using the patterns that I've already uploaded to YouTube. So rather than showing you any new products, I'm going to make up a whole bunch of these bags over the next few weeks. And at the end of it, I'll be able to show you what bags I've been able to come up with. I'm not going to make this a batch sewing video. I will go through a few of my processes and let you know what I have been doing and what my thought processes are when I'm working on all of this fabric. There is so much cutting to do that I've gone and put a brand new blade in my rotary cutter. It'll be much easier to glide through the fabric that way. Now I'm going to start off with the biggest project first. I want to cut out the same fabric pieces that I did for my soft boxy bags. I'll set these ones aside. We'll work out a project for those later. And then I have all of these bigger pieces here. I'm going to see how many pieces I can cut into the soft boxy bag sizes, and then as the pieces get smaller, the projects will get smaller. And there's just enough width in this piece of fabric to get one boxy bag that's 21 inches wide by 16 inches. When I do this kind of work, it's much easier for me to work in inches because the numbers are bigger and I can see better. That's one down and lots more to go. When I have a piece that's around about this size, it's the same 21 inches, but it's a little bit narrower. I think this is still a good size to make a boxy bag. It's only 3 inches shorter, so I'll actually leave that one exactly as it is and turn that into a boxy bag as well. It'll be a medium-sized one. And I'll now go on with the rest. All right, here's what I've done so far. With the larger pieces of fabric, I've cut them all into the soft boxed bag size, and I've managed to get 2 of each colour, which is great because last time I could only get 1. So there's going to be 16 of these bags, and one of them will be a smaller one. The other thing I've done is cut up the lining for every one of these pieces. So I've kept the lining whole and the outer fabric whole. And with the smaller pieces, I've also cut those up, and I've managed to get 2 of each of those. So far, I think I'm going to have about 32 bags, and then I've got a couple of smaller pieces, which will give me another 2 bags, so that should be 34 bags possibly. And the lining has been cut for all of those as well. The stabiliser and the linings have all been prepared. The bigger ones have been cut to their final size. So far I've spent 3 hours and 20 minutes and I've used 7.8 metres of fabric for the lining. So much fabric. I'm going to now set aside these smaller pieces because I'm not quite sure what I want to do with those. These ones I know I want them to be the same size as my soft boxed bags. So what I'm going to do now is fold all the pieces in half and cut out the box corners. Each fabric piece will have the lining remain with it. I want to keep all the pieces together at this stage, just in case there's any discrepancy in the sizing. And my lining is about 1/2 inch bigger than the outer fabric because I'm going to put a false seam in the bottom. And you've seen me do that with projects before. I have a couple of offcuts that I keep for box corners. And this one here has my seam allowance included. And I'm going to have 1.5 inch or 4 centimetre box corners. So I'll just place that on the edge of my fabric. My seam allowance is there, and then I'll trace this out, and there's my box corner. And I'm going to keep these fabric pieces lined up. The fold on the lining will overhang slightly as long as everything's lined up at the top. And the smaller piece that I have is taking into account the zip that I have on the side here. So that will be a slightly smaller box corner because I've still got a zip to add at the top. So what I'll do now for all of my bigger bag pieces, I'll mark out all the box corners and then I'll cut them all out. Okay, so last night and this morning I've really knuckled down, and what I've done is placed labels on the inside of some of the lining pieces and also on the outside of some of my outer fabric pieces. Now, when I say some, what I'm doing is these labels here are my very first label that I've ever used, and they've been the most popular. So I've been putting those on most of my products, but I've decided that because I now have some newer labels, I'm going to use my Christine Made It label on the outside of some of these bags. It's a little bit of a test, which if I remember I'll talk about later. I've got my faux leather labels on the outside. On the inside of those bags I'll have my regular label, and then I've also got my regular labels on other bags. So I've spent all of last night doing that and this morning as well. I've also, my son's here with a broken leg on the couch, so I've put him to work and he's putting zips in for me. So the next thing I've done after all the labels is put my continuous zips in. He's positioned everything with double-sided tape on these smaller pouches. Then what I've done also is grabbed all my webbing or strapping. I've cut up 16 pieces, and these are going to go into my larger bags. So with the 16 larger bags, I've cut my handles up and I'm going to position those in place on all of my bags now. I'll sew those in, and once I've done that, I'll give these bags to my son and he can put the zips in at the top. I've got a real assembly line happening here and a little bit of cheap labour while my son's laid up on the couch. So now I'm going to cut up all of my strapping, attach that to all of my larger bags. Luke's still working on the zips for the smaller pouches, but I can also start sewing those in place as well. One of the techniques I use for my batch sewing, once I've cut up all the strapping that I have for one whole bag, I'll then take each individual piece and cut that in half. That way I don't have random sized pieces for 16 different bags. If I do one at a time, I can pair up these handles each time. To place them on my fabric, rather than measuring from the centre and measuring out a certain amount of distance, which is what I do with a single bag, I'll grab a template or a ruler and I'll line up the straight edge along the top of my fabric, and then I'll line a straight edge along the side of my box corner. And I've already got a predetermined size, so once I know what that is, then I can just place my strapping in the same place every single time. So in this case, I've got a 4-inch line from the top down and 2.5 inches from the side of the box corner. And I'll just pop a pin in place there. Then I'll move the ruler over slightly so that I've got that line marked there, and I measure the same 2.5 inches across, and I can place my strapping in the correct position and then turn it around, and I can do exactly the same thing from the other side. Measure down that 4 inches and then 2.5 inches from the outside edge. So just move the position of my ruler each time, and from the if I measure from the outside edge of my box corner, this is where the top of my bag is going to be finished, so I know my handles are going to be nicely centered across the bag. It's a much easier way to do this when you're doing batch sewing. You'll save so much time by not having to measure the center, then measure out and down. So I'll take each one of these to the machine. I'll then do the folding and sewing as I go, all the while keeping my linings with it. All right, all of the handles are now in place for the boxed bags. So they've just been sewn around with a square on the corners of each. And as I mentioned, the lining stays together with each of the bags as I go along. The next thing for me to do for these bags and my pouches is to put the zips in. For the small bag and the large ones, this is where we're at. We've put a strip of continuous tape along both edges, placed that on the outer fabric, and then placed the lining directly over the top. So Luke's been busy doing this for the past couple of days. And we've done exactly the same for the larger pieces as well. Now the larger bags, they've got a box corner at the bottom and at the top here. But these smaller ones, they're going to be pouches. I'm not exactly sure whether I'm going to be making box bags or pouches at this stage, but I can do that later anyway. But up until this point, getting everything prepared, ready for the zips to be installed, it's taken 7.5 hours. I've used 16 metres of webbing for the handles and I think about 4.5 metres of continuous zip, not to mention all the other bits and pieces. But I am keeping a running total of how long everything takes me to do. Based on the prices that I think I'm going to get for my bags, or the products that I think I'm making at the moment, I need to get this under 20 hours. So I've done 7.5 hours so far. I've got to get my zips done, the corners boxed, and all sorts of other things. So I'm hoping that I can keep this job under 20 hours to be able to make it worth my while. I should get there. Now I'll go and do all the zips. Once I've inserted the zips on both sides, I turn everything the right way around and then I'll go and top stitch. Well, I've had a really good run in the last 90 minutes. I have put all the zips in all of the bags and pouches, including these ones here that I don't know what I'm going to do with yet. I've also top stitched all of them. One of the things that makes the job really quick is not to have to change thread colours all the time. So you can see I've got a mid-green, a really pale green, charcoals, salmon, rust, burgundy, all sorts of different colours. With every single one of these, I've used one thread on the top and one thread for my linings. For the linings, I've used cream for all of the fabric pieces, regardless of what colours I had in the lining. I think most of them had some kind of cream in the background. And for the outer fabric, for the top stitching, I've used this, it's a sort of a bluish purple shade, a bluey purplish grey shade of blue. It's Resant and the colour is, it's a Resant 120 or Tex 24 and the colour is 0355. So regardless of the brand, because I usually use Gutermann or Resant thread, you don't have to go and use a perfect match for all of your fabric pieces. Most of the time I'll use this blue-grey or even just a more pale grey, and that tends to blend into the background of all of these fabric pieces. So all the top stitching is completely finished. I've now got to go and put all of these zipper pulls on, I think, and I'm feeling like being a cruel mum and teaching my son how to put them on. Right now I've got him sorting out different coloured cam snaps or plastic press studs because I got a whole bunch in lots of different colours. Giving him some work to do whilst he's laid up, and I'm feeling nasty, and I think I should teach him how to put these zipper pulls on. It can be a painful job sometimes, but that's next. I'm going to put one pull onto the smaller bags, two onto these larger bags. After I've done that, I can start putting my side seams together and then boxing my corners. Not much to go. I'll see if I can go and con my son into putting these pulls on with me. Okay, so I've managed to get all the zipper pulls onto my bags, and then I've gone and turned all the fabric around so that I've got the outer fabric and the lining separated from each other. I've done that on the large bags and on these smaller pouches or bags as well. And I think I've probably decided that I'm going to make these smaller ones a small version of the boxed bags, but I might have them, I might have the opening at the top a little bit smaller than the bottom. And the reason I'm thinking about doing boxed bags instead of normal pouches is because I haven't put zipper tabs on. I didn't want to put zipper tabs on today. So to help prevent the corners from not sitting properly, I'm going to give these smaller boxed corners. At least that's my plan right now. I'll set this aside just for the moment because I'm still thinking about those. For the bigger ones, I'm going to take all of them to the machine, sew up the side seams on the outer fabric and on the lining, and with the lining I'm going to leave an opening on one side. Now before I go on, I just wanted to show you, these are all of the fabric pieces left over from cutting out the box corners at the bottom of my bags. I haven't kept the ones from the top of the bag because they're a fair bit smaller, but I actually have a project idea in mind for all of these pieces. So I'm keeping these aside just for the moment. I've got an idea for a bag for these. I might do that in a separate video, but show you how this looks later. So now to sew up all my side seams. What I've done now are all of the side seams on all of the larger bags that I'm working on, and I've left an opening in the lining of one of the side seams so that I can turn everything through later on. Now that I've done all of these larger bags, I need to box the corners. So I'm going to box the bottom corners on each one's individually for the outer and the lining, and then for the middle section or the top section where the zip is, I'll be doing the lining and the outer fabric together. So I will go and do all of those next. With these, I've been thinking about these smaller ones. I discovered I made a huge mistake with them. I have to rethink what I was going to do. I should have actually made a bag before I cut everything out. So not to worry, I'll work something out with those. I'll leave those aside for the time being and work on those a little bit later. But for now, it's back to boxing the corners. So this is one I have done already. I've boxed the bottom on the lining and the outer, and then I've boxed the top section together. This is now ready to be turned the right way around and have the side seam closed up, and then the bag's finished. Nearly there. All right, I finally finished sewing up all of the really big boxed bags. They've all been priced and tagged and put on my website, so everything is completely done with those. I can set that aside. So far I've spent about 15.5 hours, and that includes 2 hours of taking photos and uploading to my website. All I have left to do is this here. Now I've had a bit of a dilemma with these because I should have actually tested one first before I cut out my box corners. So I've been playing around with a few different things that I can do with them. This one here is just the wide box corner at the bottom with no boxing at the top. This one here has a small box corner at the top and the wide one at the bottom. And then this one here, I've done the box corner the same size, top and bottom. It looks a little bit squat to me, and I really don't know which one is going to be the best bag to make out of these pieces. So what I think I will do is make a couple of each or a few of each. That way the customers can be the judge and they can decide which ones they like. I also figured that if I made all the bags in this style and didn't sell any, then I've wasted my entire time. Whereas if I have a few different sizes or a few different styles, at least some of them will sell. That's my theory anyway. So I'm not really happy with myself over these ones, but that's hopefully a lesson learned. I will go and finish these up. I just had a look back at the footage from the beginning of the video and discovered that I started this project nearly 10 weeks ago. So my mission today is to completely finish up all of these bags, have everything priced and tagged, and then I can just tally up how much this has all cost me in time and material. So now I will go back and finish up the bags using whatever styles I've got here. So what I've done is turned all of my bag pieces inside out and separated the linings. All I have to do now is sew up all the sides, and these ones here, they were just scrappy bits, so they just need to be sewn up and closed up as well. After making a few of these, I've decided that I'm just going to go and box the corners at the top of the bag. So if I grab the partially made bag here and just open that out, rather than going to the trouble of measuring, I have slightly measured. What I'm doing is making a mark 1 inch from the outside edge here, and I'm just going to cut straight down where I've already done my top stitching. That means I've got my seam allowance along here somewhere, so that means I'm only going to have a really small box corner at the top of my bag. I'll cut this little section out on each end of the bag, then I can have a narrower box corner at the top than what is at the base of the bag. It'll save me a lot of time this way, and it'll also give me much neater corners at the top of the bag where the zip is. With all the bags finished, all I have to do now is turn everything the right way out, and the last thing left for me to do will be to close up these openings. I'm not sure if I'm optimistic or excited that I'm going to see how these bags have all turned out. I'm not really that hopeful that they're going to be very nice, but even if I mark them down at a low price, I think I'll still recover the time I've spent. So I'll go and close up all those bags and see how they've all turned out. I am so pleased to have finally finished these bags. Every single one of the little ones is completely finished now, and I have to say I don't think they look as bad as I first thought. I'm pleased that I decided, rather than keeping big box corners, I've decided to have the wide bottom. Well, I had no choice there, but have a smaller bottom at the top. But I'm happy now that I've decided just to make the smaller box corners at the top of the bag. It was going to be too difficult to have nice looking zip ends by not doing anything to them at all. So I think everything's worked out the way it's supposed to. I will finish putting all these little tags on, and then I can turn off my clock and work out exactly how long everything's taken me and what all my costs have been. And we'll have a look at all of the bags together in a moment. All right, let's have a look and see how many bags we've got here. Well, I can tell you how many we've got. Of the really big ones at the back, which are the same as those soft boxy bags that I made in a previous video. There's 16 of those, and they're all pretty much the same size except for this teal one in the front row. It's a little bit smaller. And then what I've done is made a whole bunch of these little pouches. There's 2 little boxed bags down here, and the rest of them are the pouches that have the small box corners at the top and the wider box corner at the bottom. I'll show you that one in a moment. And again over here we've got the rest of them. My aim with this project was not to waste any fabric at all, and I think I've achieved success in that I've made this bag here out of all of the boxed corner scraps. So I have done a separate video for this project, and I'll pop a link in the description below, but all the boxed corners have been put into this bag here, so there's been no wastage. Well, there's been almost no wastage for this entire project. So let's go and have a look and see how long it's all taken me and what it's cost me. Well, I don't know about you, but I am certainly pleased that that job is over and done with. I've spent almost 3 months working on these, and even before then I had the fabric just sitting there waiting for me to do something with it. It's really just been taking up a lot of space in my dining room and in my sewing room. I'm so glad I can finally put everything into the shop for this weekend. Let's talk about how long it took me and what my expenses were and whether or not I've met my target. When I first started making these bags, I had in mind that I was going to sell these ones for $35 because I had sold my last lot at that price. Now they sold really well and they sold a little bit too quickly. So these ones, they're a little bit bigger. I'm going to sell them for $45 instead of $35. And the small pouches, I had in my mind that I wanted $25 each for them. So based on how many I knew I was going to be able to make, I had a target set for 21 hours to get the whole project finished. I'm pleased that it's come well under that. In fact, it took me 18 hours from the start of the project all the way to the end where I've put on the little tabs at the end of the zips. I've reduced my time costs down by 3 hours, which was good because I was a little bit disappointed in how my pouches have turned out. I'm fine with these. They're just cute little boxy bags. I've only got 2 of those and they're fine. They're perfectly well balanced. So I'm happy with those. I'm going to charge $15 for these. There's only 2 of them. Now, the bigger pouches, I ended up deciding on having the small box corner at the top because the big box corner was just way too much, and not having anything at all didn't really look nice, and it was easier to actually construct it with the box corners. And in my mind, I'd initially wanted $25 for each of them, and for most of them, I'll still actually get that. So I'm happy about that. There are a few. Now let me look at my list. I ended up having 11 pouches that I can sell at $25, or in my mind I can sell at $25 each. And I've got 3 pouches that I consider too ugly to be $25, so I'm just making those $15 each. It's probably just me. They're probably still perfectly capable of getting $25, but I'm not really that fond of them, so $15 it is for the other 3. Based on the dollar figure that I was going to get for all of my bags, as I said, I needed to get the time within 21 hours. And now that my prices have been adjusted somewhat, I went through a period for a while where I thought that I wasn't even going to get $15 for these ones. I really had to get the amount of hours down that I put into this. So I was lucky that I managed to get that down to 18, but I was pleasantly surprised that these ones have turned out okay. Now, let me start with all of the expenses and my costs and a little bit about how I price things. All of the fabric that I've used in all of these bags, including the lining fabric, was given to me for free. So I didn't have to pay for any of that fabric. Now, I know some people think that even though I get the fabric for free, I should charge for it because it takes time for me to process it, remove labels and things like that. But I do actually take that time into account. My personal view is that if I get something for free, I should pay it forward. So the customer will never pay for the fabric that I don't pay for. So the fabric on the outside and on the inside was free to me, so therefore it's free to the customer. They do pay for the time it takes me to neaten the fabric, the time it takes me to remove any adhesive labels that might be on there, just generally getting the fabric ready for me to be able to make a saleable product. So even though the fabric is free, my processing time is not. Here's what I did pay for. The webbing that I used for my handles, I used 16 meters all up. I paid for the zips and I used 4.5 meters of zips, and I think I used about 40 zip sliders. Some of the bags have 2 sliders and others have 1. And then I used 48 of these little tags on the end of my zip. My labels, every one of the bags has a label, at least on the outside, and some of them have labels on the inside as well. So these are my tried and true Stitch This label. They've got Handmade in Nagambie, which is the town that we're in. Stitch This is the name of my business, and then it's got a link to my website on there as well. I also have some bags that have got my faux leather label on there, and that says Christine Made It. So with those bags, I've also put my business details on the inside. So no matter who sees these bags, you're always going to be able to find out where they came from. So that's both types of labels. The biggest thing that I used was the Parland, which was the fleecy stabilizer that I've used inside all of these. I used 6.5 meters of that, and I stood here for a couple of hours. I've got to say I love my heat press. It just saved so much time and shoulder work. So it took me a couple of hours to use the heat press and fuse all of the stabilizer onto every single scrap of fabric that I had. As I said at the beginning of the video, my aim was to use up every piece of fabric and not have any wastage. So the total cost of goods that I've had to purchase to make all of these bags was $100. It was just a little bit under $100. I've rounded it up. That includes everything that I've used in these bags. Now there are consumables that I've used like double-sided tape, my rotary cutter blade. I put a new blade in at the beginning and it very soon went blunt. Thread, I went through lots of thread. Those consumables are factored into my labour rate. Now my labour rate is $45 an hour. I have a flat rate that I charge out for any work that I do in the shop, whether it be making bags or doing alterations. So currently it's $45. I haven't reviewed it for a couple of years and I'm actually planning on doing that this week, so it might go up a fair bit. But at the moment I'm happy with $45. And that takes into account my consumables that I've already mentioned, but it also covers taxes, subscriptions, internet fees, website fees, superannuation, power, machine maintenance, all of those sorts of things have been factored into my $45 an hour labour rate. That also includes a minimum hourly rate in Australia of about $26 per hour if I were working in a shop getting paid to sew. So $26 an hour is my minimum hourly rate, but then I've added everything else to that to cover all my consumables and power and all of those kinds of things, insurance and everything like that. So I think I've waffled on enough. How did I go? It took me 18 hours to make the bags at $45. That was $810 worth of labour and consumables to make all of these bags. So I have 16 of these large soft box bags at $45 each, $720. I have 2 of these cute little box bags, $15 each, so that's $30. I have 11 of these pouches that aren't terribly ugly. They are $25 each. And then I have another 3 pouches that I consider to be ugly, and they're only going to be $15 each. So that's $45. So of all of those bags, and I think that worked out to be 32 bags, that turns out to be $1,070 in products that I've got to sell today. And then I've got one more bag, and that is this one here. I'm really pleased with this. I haven't yet decided if I'm going to sell this bag. It's been made up using the box corners from all of these bags that we've made. And all I had left were 4 little pieces, and I just cannot find those 4 pieces anywhere. So all I had left in fabric was just 4 little pieces of wastage. Well, they're around here somewhere, they'll get used. But I'm really happy that I've managed to get another bag made out of all of those box corner ends. And that one, I've just pulled a figure out of my head of $125. I could probably get a lot more for this, given that it's a one-off bag, and it's a little bit interesting in the fact that it's completely made out of scrap fabric. With 32 bags, that comes to $1,070. If I add this one here, it'll be $125, so that brings it to $1,195 worth of stock that I've got to sell in the shop. Let's round that up to $1,200 just to make it easier. So $1,200 worth of stock, and the total value of my expenses, including my labour cost, was $910. In my labour rate, I consider most of that to be profit. I allow myself that $26 for a wage. Anything on top of that is just profit. So $910 worth of costs with labour and cost of goods, and a potential resale figure of $1,200. I think that's pretty good. So even with the profits that I make in my labour rate, I'm still going to be making an extra $300 on top of all of that time that I haven't had to use. I hope all that's made sense. I feel like this project has just gone on and on and on. Kind of reminds me of that old Lamb Chop song. Do you dare me to sing it? This is the song that never ends. Look it up. Look it up. This is a song that never ends, with Lamb Chop, and I can't remember the lady's name that sung the song, but look, I think I'm a little bit delirious because I've made too many of these bags. I'm so glad it's finally finished. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I think by now you'll have noticed that this wasn't an actual tutorial. This was me showing you my processes in how to do batch sewing and how to get the most out of my fabric, and just have a little bit of a think about what I'm going to do, and you know, the mistakes that I've nearly made or did make along the way. If you want to make any of these bags, I will pop a link in the description below, and I'll try and remember to put a link in the comments section as well. We've got the soft boxed bag here, and we've just got some little pouches and small boxed bags. So I'll find the video links for those. The fabric will be different, of course, but the techniques will be the same. And also this one here, this bag made out of all scrap fabric. I'll pop a link down below for all of those videos if you want to go back and have a look and see how to make these yourself. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Do let me know what you think. I love all your comments, and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.